She answered a cryptic ad for a live-in chef, but what she served at midnight wasn't just on a plate. Behind those stone walls waited a woman with amber eyes and an appetite that had nothing to do with food. Ellie's uncover what really happened. The advertisement had been cryptic, nestled between pleas for lost pets and offers for lawn care in the local gazette. Culinary professionals sought for discreet live-in position, demanding palate, unique hours, generous remuneration, secluded estate, apply with signature dish concept, no name, no direct contact, just a post office box. It was the unique hours and secluded estate that snagged my attention, a welcome escape from the relentless clatter and fluorescent glare of the city bistro where I'd been plating artistic but ultimately soulless entrees. My signature dish concepta deconstructed forest floor with mushroom consomme, truffle soil, and edible mosses was perhaps a bit audacious, but it was honest, a reflection of my own quiet, earthy inclinations. Weeks later, a heavy cream envelope arrived, embossed with a single, stylized initial I didn't recognize. Inside, a contract, a non disclosure agreement thicker than my thumb, and a set of arcane travel instructions involving a series of unmarked country roads. The remuneration was indeed generous, enough to make me ignore the faint, unsettling hum of unease that vibrated beneath the offer's surface. And so I found myself one misty autumn afternoon standing before a pair of towering wrought iron gates, the kind that seemed to groan a warning rather than offer a welcome. Beyond them, a long winding driveway disappeared into a copse of ancient brooding oaks. The house, when it finally emerged from the mist and trees, was less a home and more a stone leviathan, its dark granite walls punctuated by rows of narrow, unblinking windows. It wasn't grand in a showy way, but in an older, more formidable sense, a place that had weathered centuries and kept its secrets close. A silent, gaunt woman I later learned was the housekeeper, Mrs. Perrin, met me at the imposing oak door, her presence as chilling as the draft that snaked around my ankles. She didn't smile, didn't offer a word of welcome, just led me through a labyrinth of echoing hallways, the air thick with the scent of beeswax, old paper, and something else, something faintly metallic and unsettlingly sweet, like overripe fruit on the edge of decay. My quarters were in a distant wing, spacious but sparsely furnished, with a window overlooking a walled garden that seemed to be perpetually shrouded in shadow. The kitchen, however, was a chef's dream, a vast cathedral-like space of stainless steel and gleaming copper, equipped with every conceivable culinary implement, some of which I'd only ever seen in textbooks. It was here, amidst the silent, gleaming efficiency, that I was to await her, the mistress of the house, the owner of the demanding palate. I knew nothing about her, not even her name beyond the stylized initial on the envelope. Mrs. Perrin had offered no information, her lips a thin, resolute line against any inquiry. The first few days were a strange, solitary existence. I cooked, following a list of dietary restrictions and vague preferences left on a heavy linen note card each morning: no garlic, minimal salt, a surprising penchant for game birds, and dark, bitter greens. I plated the meals with meticulous care, arranging them on antique silver trays, which Mrs. Perrin would then silently collect, returning hours later with the dishes scraped clean, or sometimes, unsettlingly, barely touched. I never saw my employer. I only felt her presence, a subtle weight in the atmosphere of the house, like a change in air pressure before a storm. I heard the faint creak of floorboards in the dead of night, the distant mournful cry of a violin, a sound that seemed to seep through the thick stone walls like a restless spirit. My senses, already heightened by desolation, became acutely attuned to these subtle signs, these ghostly imprints of an invisible life. I found myself wondering about her, this unseen epicure. Was she old, young, a recluse, an invalid? My imagination, starved for human interaction, began to weave elaborate narratives, each more improbable than the last. I pictured her as a fragile, ethereal creature, draped in velvet, subsisting on moonlight and melancholic poetry, or perhaps a formidable matriarch, sharp-tongued and imperious, ruling her shadowy domain with an iron will. The reality when it finally presented itself, was far more disquieting, far more compelling. It was the fourth night. I had prepared a roasted quail with a blackberry and juniper reduction, a dish I was particularly proud of, its earthy, autumnal flavors, a reflection of the misty landscape outside. Mrs. Barron had collected the tray, her expression, as always, unreadable. I was cleaning down my station, the rhythmic scrape of my knife against the steel, a familiar comfort in the otherwise unnerving silence of the vast kitchen, when I felt it, a subtle shift in the air, a change in the quality of the silence, as if the house itself were holding its breath. I turned slowly, a strange premonition coiling in my stomach, and there she was, standing in the arched doorway that led to the dining wing, a silhouette against the dim light of the hallway. She was tall, impossibly tall, or so it seemed in that first startling moment. Her figure swathed in something dark and flowing like pooled ink. Her hair, the color of a raven's wing, was swept up, revealing the elegant line of her neck, the sharp, aristocratic curve of jaw. She didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there, watching me, her presence a sudden, intense heat in the cool, sterile air of the kitchen. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. I could feel the blood draining from my face, leaving my skin cold and clammy. This was her, the mistress of the house, the owner of the demanding palate. And in that first electrifying moment, before a single word had been spoken, before I had even seen her face clearly in the shadows, a single unwelcome and utterly terrifying thought took root in my mind. I was in trouble. Deep, deep trouble. The silence in the kitchen stretched, taut and fragile, broken only by the frantic thumping of my own heart and the almost inaudible hiss of the pilot light on the massive gas range. She remained in the doorway, a figure of elegant shadow, her stillness more unnerving than any overt movement could have been. I found my voice, or a shaky approximation of it. Madam, I managed the word, feeling foreign and ridiculously formal on my tongue. Is everything all right with the quail? A low chuckle, a sound like dry leaves skittering across stone, emanated from the shadows. The quail, she said, her voice, a low, husky contralto, the kind that seems to vibrate in your very bone, was transcendent. She took a step forward into the slightly brighter light of the kitchen, and for the first time, I saw her face, and it was a face that would haunt my dreams and my waking hours for a long time to come. It wasn't beautiful in a conventional sense, not pretty or delicate. It was striking, formidable. Her features were sharp, almost predatory, a high, intelligent forehead, a straight, aristocratic nose, a mouth that was both sensual and cruel. Her lips stained a deep, unnatural crimson like crushed berry. But it was her eyes that held me captive. They were a startling, luminous shade of amber, flecked with gold, like a cat's eyes, and they seemed to burn with an ancient, knowing intelligence, an unnerving intensity that felt as if it could see right through me, stripping away my carefully constructed composure layer by layer. You have a remarkable talent, chef, she continued, her gaze unwavering, her voice a silken caress that nonetheless sent a shiver of apprehension down my spine. A rare sensitivity to the nuances of flavor, the interplay of light and shadow on the palate, light and shadow. It seemed an apt description, not just of my cooking, but of her, of this house, of the strange, unsettling atmosphere that permeated every stone, every shadow. Thank you, madam, I said, my voice still a little shaky. I aimed to please. Oh, I have no doubt of that, she murmured, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on her crimson lips. It wasn't a warm smile, not reassuring. It was the smile of a predator that has just scented its prey. She glided further into the kitchen, her movements fluid, almost serpentine, the dark, flowing fabric of her gown whispering against the stone floor. She stopped a few feet away from me, close enough that I could smell her perfume, a heady, exotic fragrance that reminded me of night-blooming jasmine and something else, something darker, spicier, like incense burning in a forgotten temple. It was an intoxicating, unsettling scent, a scent that seemed to bypass my rational mind and speak directly to some older, more primal part of my being. I confess she said, her amber eyes raking over me, a slow, deliberate appraisal that made my skin prickle. I was intrigued by your application. The deconstructed forest floor, an audacious choice, but then I find audacity appealing. Her gaze lingered on my face, and I felt a flush creep up my neck, a ridiculous, unwarranted blush that I prayed she couldn't see in the dim light. I was acutely aware of my own appearance, my slightly food stained chef's whites, my hair probably escaping from its usually neat bun, my hands calloused and smelling faintly of juniper and quail. I felt clumsy, unrefined, a stark contrast to her own dark, elegant perfection. It was an attempt to capture a feeling, madam, I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. The scent of damp earth, the mystery of the woods at twilight. Ah, yes, she interrupted, her voice a low purr. Mystery. I have a particular fondness for mystery. She took another step closer, and now she was so close I could feel the warmth radiating from her body. So close I could see the tiny, almost invisible lines around her eyes, the subtle pulse beating at the base of her throat. My heart was hammering, a wild, frantic rhythm against my ribs. I wanted to step back, to create some distance, but my feet seemed rooted to the spot. This house, she continued, her voice dropping even lower, almost to a whisper, is full of mysteries, chef. Hidden passages, forgotten rooms, stories that whisper in the stone when the wind howls just right. Her eyes held mine, and there was a challenge in them, an unspoken invitation. Are you a fan of such things? I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. I appreciate a good story, madam. Indeed, she said, that faint, unsettling smile playing on her lips again. And I have a feeling, chef, that you and we are going to have many stories to tell. The air between us crackled, thick with an unspoken something that was both terrifying and exhilarating. I felt as if I were standing on the edge of a precipice, the wind howling around me, the abyss yawning below. And she was there, on the other side, her hand outstretched, her amber eyes burning into mine, daring me to jump. The moment was broken by the distant, mournful chime of a grandfather clock from somewhere deep within the house, striking the hour, midnight. She tilted her head, a small, almost imperceptible movement, as if listening to some unseen, unheard cue. It is late, she said, her voice regaining some of its formal composure, though her eyes still held that unnerving, predatory gleam. You have pleased me greatly tonight, chef. Continue to do so, and you will find your tenure here most rewarding. And then, as silently, as fluidly as she had appeared, she was gone, melting back into the shadows of the hallway, leaving me alone in the vast, silent kitchen, my heart pounding, my mind reeling, the scent of night blooming jasmine and forgotten temples lingering in the air like a promise or a threat. I didn't sleep much that night. Her image, her voice, her scent, they all replayed in my mind on an endless loop. The way her amber eyes had seemed to pierce through me, the way her crimson lips had curved into that unsettling, knowing smile, the way her presence had filled the kitchen, a sudden, intense heat that had both terrified and captivated me. The ordinary, the mundane had been stripped away, revealing something older, something darker, something primal. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone and thrilled me to the core that my life, my carefully ordered, predictable life, had just taken a sharp, irrevocable turn into the unknown. The weeks that followed that first unnerving encounter settled into a strange, new rhythm, a delicate dance of avoidance and anticipation. I continued to cook, to create, to pour my heart and soul into the dishes I prepared for my enigmatic employer. But now, every meal felt like a performance, every flavor, a carefully chosen word in a silent, ongoing conversation. I rarely saw her. She remained a creature of shadows, a nocturnal presence who communicated her desires through Mrs. Perrin or via those stark linen note cards. Yet her influence was pervasive, her unseen scrutiny a constant weight on my mind. Sometimes I would find a single perfect crimson rose left on my workstation in the morning, its petals still dewy, its thorns carefully removed. There would be no note, no explanation, just the silent, eloquent offering. Other times, a rare, out of print cookbook would appear on my bedside table, its pages filled with arcane recipes and unsettling illustrations. These small, almost imperceptible gestures felt like tests, like breadcrumbs dropped along a dark, winding path, luring me deeper into her enigmatic world. My curiosity, already piqued, grew into a gnawing obsession. I found myself studying the remnants of her meals, trying to glean some insight into her character from the way she ate, the things she left untouched. A single perfect bite taken from the heart of a pear, a smear of dark chocolate a la the rim of a porcelain cup, a scattering of pomegranate seeds, like drops of blood on a silver plate. These were tiny, intimate details, glimpses into a life lived behind closed doors, a life that felt both impossibly remote and tantalizingly close. I started to tailor my menus to her perceived tastes, to the subtle hints I gleaned from her notes, from the atmosphere of the house, from the strange, melancholic music that sometimes drifted through the stone wall. I created dishes that were dark, intense, complex, with unexpected juxtapositions of flavor and texture. A venison tartare with smoked lapsang souchong and a whisper of ghost pepper, a squid ink risotto, black as midnight, studded with pearls of glistening salmon roe, a bittersweet chocolate torte, so dark it was almost savage, infused with a hint of chili and the smoky allure of mezcal. Each dish was a dare, a question, a silent offering to an unseen goddess. And sometimes, late at night, after the house had settled into its usual unnerving silence, she would appear, not in the kitchen this time, but in the shadowy doorway of my small sitting room, her presence announced by a subtle shift in the air, by the faint, intoxicating scent of night blooming jasmine. She wouldn't speak at first, just stand there, watching me, her amber eyes glowing in the dim light, her tall, elegant figure swathed in dark flowing silk. My heart would hammer against my ribs, a familiar, frantic rhythm. You are restless tonight, chef, she might say, her voice a low, husky purr that seemed to vibrate in the very air around us. Is something troubling you? And then we would talk. Or rather, she would talk and I would listen, mesmerized. She spoke of art, of poetry, of forgotten histories and arcane philosophies. Her mind was a labyrinth filled with glittering, dangerous treasures. She spoke of beauty and of darkness, of the fine, almost invisible line that separated the two. She spoke of desire, not in a crude or vulgar way, but as a primal, elemental force, a creative, destructive energy that shaped the world, that shaped us. Her words were like a spell, weaving a web of fascination around me, drawing me deeper and deeper into her enigmatic orbit. I found myself confiding in her, sharing my own thoughts, my own dreams, my own fears, things I had never spoken aloud to anyone before. And she would listen, her gaze intent, her expression unreadable, offering no easy answers, no trite reassurances, just a profound, unsettling understanding. In those late night conversations, the boundaries between us seemed to dissolve, the roles of employer and employee, of mistress and servant, fading into insignificance. We were just two souls, adrift in the darkness, drawn together by an undeniable, irresistible pull. Sometimes her hand would brush mine, a fleeting, accidental contact that would send a jolt of electricity through me, leaving my skin tingling, my senses reeling. Sometimes her gaze would linger on my lips, silent, unspoken question that made my breath catch, my heart pound. But she never crossed the line. She never made an overt move. It was a game, a subtle, dangerous dance of seduction and restraint. And she was the puppet master, pulling the strings, controlling the tempo, leaving me perpetually off balance, perpetually yearning. I was losing myself, my carefully constructed identity dissolving like mist in the morning sun. The Lena who had arrived at that secluded estate, a competent, ambitious chef with a sensible head on her shoulders, was disappearing, replaced by someone new, someone I didn't quite recognize, someone who was confused, terrified, and undeniably, irrevocably drawn to the enigmatic, captivating creature who was her employer, her confidant, her tormentor, her everything. The house itself seemed to collude in this slow, insidious seduction, its shadowy corridors, its echoing silences, its pervasive scent of beeswax and old secrets all contributed to the growing sense of unreality of being trapped in a waking dream. My own small room, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage. Its walls too thin, its silence too loud, every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind, a potential herald of her arrival. I started to anticipate her late night visits, my body thrumming with nervous, illicit excitement as the midnight hour approached. I'd leave a single lamp burning, a silent invitation, a beacon in the darkness. I'd choose my night clothes with a new, uncharacteristic care, opting for soft silks and delicate lace, fabrics that felt sensual against my skin, fabrics that I hoped might, in some small, subconscious way, please her. These preparations felt both shameful and thrilling, a secret, intimate ritual performed for an audience of one. When she did appear, her presence filling the doorway, her amber eyes glowing in the dim light, my heart would perform that familiar, painful acrobatics. The air between us would crackle, thick with unspoken desires, with a tension so palpable it was almost unbearable. Our conversations, those strange, nocturnal explorations of art and philosophy and the darker corners of the human soul became increasingly personal, increasingly intimate. She had a way of drawing me out, of peeling back my layers, of exposing the raw, vulnerable core of my being. She seemed to see me, truly see me, in a way that no one else ever had. And that recognition, as terrifying as it was also undeniably, intoxicatingly seductive. One night, she found me sketching in a small, leather bound notebook I always kept by my bed. I was attempting to capture the play of moonlight on the gnarled branches of the ancient oak tree outside my window, a futile, amateurish endeavor. She came and stood behind me, looking over my shoulder, her presence a sudden, intense heat at my back. I could feel her warm breath on my neck, her subtle, intoxicating perfume enveloping me like a silken shroud. You have a delicate hand, chef, she murmured, her voice a low, husky caress close to my ear, a sensitivity to the ephemeral. Her fingers, those long, elegant fingers, came to rest on my shoulder, a light, almost tentative touch, yet it felt like a brand, searing my skin, sending an explosion of sensation through my entire body. Her thumb began to move, stroking the tense muscle at the base of my neck in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. You carry so much tension, Lena, she whispered, her lips brushing against my hair, sending a fresh wave of shivers through me. You need to learn to release it. Release it. The words, so similar to ones she had spoken before, now carried a new, more dangerous, more explicit weight. The air between us thickened, heavy with unspoken invitation, with the intoxicating promise of surrender. My breath hitched, my heart hammered against my ribs, a wild, frantic rhythm. I wanted to turn, to look into her eyes, to confirm the meaning I so desperately, so recklessly wanted to read into her words, into her touch, but I couldn't move. I was frozen, transfixed, caught in the intoxicating spell of her proximity, of her touch, of her voice. Her other hand came up, her fingers gently tracing the line of my jaw, tilting my face upwards towards her. I closed my eyes, a soft sigh escaping my lips, a silent, complete surrender. Her lips, cool and surprisingly soft, brushed against my temple, then my cheekbone, then lingered, tantalizingly, at the corner of my mouth. Open your eyes, Lena, she whispered, her voice a silken command that I was powerless to resist. I opened my eyes and found myself looking directly into hers. They were inches away, those luminous, predatory amber eyes, now dark and dilated, filled with an emotion that was both terrifying and exhilarating, a raw, untamed hunger that mirrored my own. Tell me, chef, she murmured, her lips almost touching mine, her breath warm and sweet against my skin. What is it you truly crave? Crave. The word, spoken in her low, husky voice, was like a key unlocking a hidden chamber within me, a chamber filled with desires I hadn't known I possessed, desires that were now clamoring for release, for acknowledgement, for her. And in that moment, bathed in the soft glow of the single lamp, The scent of night blooming jasmine and forgotten temples filling my senses, the sound of her voice, a seductive, irresistible poison in my veins. I knew with a certainty that both thrilled and terrified me. That the answer to her question, the only possible answer, was her, only her. The silence in my small room was a living entity, pulsing with unspoken words, with the raw, almost unbearable tension that arced between us. Maya's face was a breath away, her amber eyes, dark and dilated, holding mine captive. Her question, what is it you truly crave? Hanging heavy in the air, a dare, an invitation, a demand. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, desperate bird beating its wings against the bars of its cage. My mind, usually a bastion of rational thought, of sensible restraint, was a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. Fear, certainly, but also a wild, reckless, undeniable desire. A desire that was rapidly overwhelming every other consideration. I could feel the warmth of her body, the subtle rise and fall of her chest as she breathed, the intoxicating scent of her perfume, now mingled with the fainter, muskier aroma of her skin, a fragrance that was both foreign and achingly, terrifyingly familiar. Her fingers still cupping my jaw, were a gentle, insistent pressure, tilting my face further upwards towards hers. Her thumb stroked my cheekbone, a feather like caress that sent shivers of anticipation cascading through my entire being. This was it, the precipice, the point of no return, the moment where a single word, a single gesture could change everything irrevocably and forever. And I knew with a clarity that was both terrifying and exhilarating what I had to do, what I wanted to do. The carefully constructed walls I had built around my heart, around my desires, the walls that had begun to crumble weeks ago, now dissolved completely, leaving me exposed, raw, vulnerable. You, I whispered the word, a fragile breath, a confession, a surrender. I crave you. A slow, predatory smile curved her crimson lips, a smile of triumph, of satisfaction, of a dawning, dangerous, exhilarating complicity. Her eyes, those luminous, predatory amber eyes, seemed to glow with an inner fire. I thought as much, she murmured, her voice a low, husky purr that vibrated through me, igniting every nerve ending. And then she closed the small gap that remained between us, and her mouth found mine. The first touch of her lips was soft, almost tentative, a question, but there was no hesitation in my response. I met her kiss with an answering hunger, a desperate, urgent need that had been building within me for weeks, for months, for what felt like an eternity. The kiss deepened, quickly, fiercely, a desperate exploration of mouths and senses, a raw, untamed expression of a desire that had been suppressed for too long. Her tongue, surprisingly bold, delved into my mouth, a silken, knowing invader that mapped the sensitive contours, igniting fires I hadn't known existed. I responded in kind, my own tongue meeting hers in a desperate, urgent dance, a silent, passionate conversation that transcended words. A low groan rumbled in her chest, a sound that was both an admission of pleasure and a cry of surrender. I melted into her, my arms snaking around her neck, my fingers tangling in the silky strands of her raven hair, pulling her closer until there was no space left between us, until our bodies were pressed together, a desperate, searing embrace. Her hands, which had been cradling my face, began to roam, her fingers tracing the line of my jaw, a feather-light touch that nonetheless sent tremors through my entire being. They slid down my neck, pausing for a moment at the hollow of my throat where my pulse beat a frantic tattoo against her skin, before continuing their descent, her palms gliding over my shoulders, down my arms, leaving a trail of searing heat in their wake. The small, leather-bound notebook I had been holding clattered to the floor, forgotten. The world outside, the shadowy garden, the distant, mournful cry of an owl, the very concept of time itself ceased to exist. There was only this, the heat, the pressure, the intoxicating taste of her, the feeling of her body yielding against mine. Her hands moved to the delicate pearl buttons of my silk nightgown, her fingers deft, unhurried, yet filled with an undeniable, urgent purpose. One by one, the buttons gave way, revealing the soft pale skin beneath. Her gaze dropped, her amber eyes raking over me, a slow, deliberate appraisal that made my skin prickle, my breath catch in my throat. You are exquisite, Lena, she whispered, her voice thick with an emotion that was both possessive and reverent. Her fingers, cool and surprisingly steady, traced the line of my collarbone, then moved lower to the gentle swell of my breasts. Her touch was like a brand, searing my skin, sending an explosion of sensation through my entire body. I arched into her touch, a silent plea for more, a soft moan escaping my lips. She smiled, that slow, predatory smile, and then she lowered her head, her lips finding the sensitive skin of my neck, her tongue tracing a searing path downwards towards the valley between my breasts. I gasped, my head falling back, my fingers clenching in her hair, my body alive with a desperate, urgent need. This was madness, glorious, terrifying, exhilarating madness. A surrender to a desire so profound, so elemental, that it threatened to consume me completely. And in that moment, bathed in the soft glow of the single lamp, the scent of night blooming jasmine, and forgotten temples filling my senses, the sound of her ragged breathing a symphony in my ears, I knew with a certainty that both thrilled and terrified me that I was lost, utterly, irrevocably, beautifully lost, and I never ever wanted to be found. The silk of my nightgown was a whisper against my skin as Maya's hands, those long, elegant, knowing hands, continued their exploration. Her touch was a symphony of sensation, one moment feather light, the next firm and possessive, each caress igniting new fires, awakening dormant nerve endings, drawing from me soft, involuntary moans that seemed to please her immensely. Her lips, having tasted the skin of my throat, my collarbone, now found the curve of my breast. Her tongue, hot and wet, flicked against my nipple, sending a jolt of pure, unadulterated pleasure straight to my core. I cried out, a small, strangled sound, my fingers tightening their grip in her raven hair, my hips beginning to move in a slow, instinctive rhythm against the pressure of her body. She suckled gently at first, then, with increasing urgency, her teeth grazing lightly, sending spirals of exquisite torment radiating outwards, down to the very tips of my toes. I was on fire, every inch of me alive, screaming for more. The world had narrowed to this single, incandescent point of contact, to the feel of her mouth on my breast, to the heat of her body pressed against mine, to the intoxicating scent of her arousal, a scent that was now inextricably mingled with my own. Her free hand, the one not tangled in my hair, slid lower over the flat expanse of my stomach, her fingers tracing lazy, tantalizing circles that made my muscles clench in anticipation. Then, lower still, her touch becoming more intimate, more daring, her fingers brushing against the soft curls at the apex of my thighs. I gasped, my body arching off the bed, a silent plea, a desperate invitation. She seemed to understand, her fingers deftly parting the delicate folds, finding the slick, swollen nub of my clitoris. Her touch was electric, a shock wave that made me cry out her name, a raw, broken sound. Maya, oh God, Maya, she responded with a low groan, her mouth leaving my breast to find mine once more. A deep, possessive kiss that swallowed my cries. Her tongue delving, demanding, mirroring the intimate exploration her fingers were conducting below. It was an overwhelming assault on my senses, a symphony of pleasure so intense it bordered on pain. My mind, usually a whirl of anxious thought, was blissfully, gloriously empty. There was only sensation, raw, untamed, elemental. Her fingers moved with a skill, a precision that bespoke a deep, intuitive understanding of the female body, of my body. She knew just where to touch, just how much pressure to apply, just how to vary the rhythm, the intensity, to coax from me a response that was both a surrender and a fierce, untamed assertion of my own burgeoning desire. I was writhing beneath her, my hips bucking, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps, my body a taut, quivering bowstring of pleasure. The sounds that escaped my lips were no longer words, just raw, primal expressions of an ecstasy so profound it was almost unbearable. And then I felt it, the first subtle tremor, the telltale clenching of my inner muscles, the sharp, indrawn breath that signaled the approaching release. Maya, I gasped, my voice a ragged, broken plea. I'm going to let go, Lena. She whispered against my lips, her voice a low, husky command. Let go for me. And I did. With a final, desperate surge of movement, a guttural cry torn from my throat, the world exploded in a blinding flash of white hot pleasure, a shattering, transcendent release that left me gasping, trembling, my body convulsing in a series of shuddering aftershocks. I clung to her, anchoring myself in the eye of the storm, tears of pure, unadulterated ecstasy streaming down my face. She held me close, her own body still trembling, her breath hot and ragged against my ear, whispering soft, soothing words, words of comfort, of shared release, words that were lost in the overwhelming tide of sensation and emotion. As the waves subsided, leaving me limp and sated, my body humming with a languid, delicious exhaustion, she shifted, her weight resting lightly beside me. We lay there for a long moment, tangled in a heap of limbs and damp silk, the silence in the room now filled with a profound sense of peace, of completion. I turned my head, looking at her profile in the dim light. Her eyes were closed, her dark lashes fanned out against her cheeks, her lips slightly swollen, curved in a soft, satisfied smile. She looked beautiful, content, and utterly, devastatingly desirable. She opened her eyes, as if sensing my gaze, and her amber eyes, now soft and luminous, met mine. She reached out, her fingers gently tracing the line of my jaw, her touch sending a fresh wave of warmth, of a tender, almost painful affection through me. That, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, was extraordinary. I nodded, unable to speak, my throat suddenly tight with unshed tears. Extraordinary didn't even begin to cover it. It had been a revelation, a transformation, a journey to a place within myself I hadn't known existed. She leaned in and kissed me, a soft, lingering kiss, a kiss of tenderness, of shared intimacy, of a dawning, terrifying, beautiful complicity. And now, chef, she murmured against my lips, a faint, predatory smile playing on hers, her amber eyes glowing with a renewed, dangerous fire. Now it's my turn to crave. And as she moved, her body covering mine once more, her hands and mouth beginning a new, even more intimate exploration, I knew with a certainty that both thrilled and terrified me, that the night was far from over. The midnight snack had been served, and it seemed, was just the appetizer, the roles reversed with a fluid, intoxicating grace. Maya, who had been the gentle but insistent conductor of my pleasure, now lay beneath me, her body an offering, her amber eyes alight with a mixture of anticipation and a surprising, disarming vulnerability. The power dynamic, if one had truly existed beyond the subtle dance of employer and employee, now felt utterly, beautifully equalized. We were two women, stripped bare, literally and metaphorically, driven by a mutual consuming hunger. Her skin, where it wasn't already slick with our shared exertions, was cool and smooth beneath my questing fingertips. I mirrored her earlier exploration, my hands relearning the landscape of her body, no longer as an observer, but as an active participant, a cartographer of her desire. I traced the elegant line of her collarbone, the surprisingly delicate curve of her rib, the gentle swell of her stomach. Her breath hitched as my fingers brushed against the sensitive skin of her inner thighs, a silent, eloquent testament to her arousal. Her scent, that intoxicating blend of night blooming jasmine and something darker, spicier, was now amplified, mingled with the salty tang of her perspiration, a primal, irresistible perfume that drew me inexorably closer. I lowered my head, my lips finding the soft, vulnerable skin of her neck, tasting the faint, metallic tang of her pulse, which beat a frantic tattoo against my mouth. She gasped, her fingers tangling in my hair, not pulling me away, but urging me on, guiding me. My mouth moved lower, over her breastbone, to the valley between her breasts. Her skin was like warm silk, her nipples already hard, beaded, a silent invitation. I took one into my mouth, suckling gently, my tongue teasing, tormenting, and she cried out, a low, guttural sound that vibrated through me, igniting a fresh wave of my own desire. Her hips began to move, a slow, sinuous rhythm against mine, her body arching upwards, seeking a deeper, more intimate connection. Her hands, which had been in my hair, now slid down my back, her fingers tracing the curve of my spine before moving lower, cupping my buttocks, pulling me tighter against her, her nails, surprisingly sharp, digging lightly into my flesh. It was a possessive, demanding gesture, one that spoke of a hunger as fierce, as untamed as my own. And I reveled in it, in her strength, in her unabashed desire. This was not the enigmatic, composed mistress of the house. This was Maya, raw, undone, consumed by the same fire that raged within me. I moved lower still, my lips and tongue tracing a searing path down her stomach, over the gentle curve of her hip bone, towards the dark, mysterious delta between her thighs. The air was thick with our mingled scents, with the sound of our ragged breathing, with the almost unbearable tension of our shared anticipation. When my mouth finally found her, she cried out, a sharp, broken sound, her body arching off the bed, her fingers clenching into fists, her entire being a taut, quivering bowstring of pleasure. Her taste was intoxicating, a heady mix of salt and sweetness, a primal, elemental flavor that was both foreign and achingly, terrifyingly familiar. I explored her with a reverence, a devotion that surprised even myself. This was not just a physical act, it was an act of worship, an offering to the goddess who had awakened a part of me I hadn't known existed. My tongue, my lips, my fingers, they all moved with an intuitive, instinctive knowledge, as if guided by some ancient primal wisdom. I learned the rhythms of her pleasure, the subtle shifts in her breathing, the tiny, involuntary sounds that signaled her escalating arousal, and I took a fierce, possessive joy in her surrender, in the way her body writhed beneath me, in the raw, uninhibited cries that escaped her lips. Time ceased to exist. There was only this dark, intimate sanctuary, this shared exploration of the furthest reaches of pleasure. The world outside, with its rules, its judgments, its inevitable consequences, was a distant, irrelevant echo. And then I felt it, the first subtle tremor, the telltale clenching of her inner muscles, the sharp, indrawn breath that signaled her approaching release. I quickened my rhythm, my touch becoming more urgent, more demanding, pushing her closer to the edge. Lena, oh God, Lena, please, she gasped, her voice a ragged, broken plea, with a final guttural cry, a cry that seemed to be torn from the very depths of her soul. She shattered, her body convulsing in a series of violent, shuddering aftershocks, her essence flooding my senses, a warm, salty tide of surrender. I held her close, my own body still trembling, my lips still pressed against her, tasting the aftermath of her release, a profound sense of triumph, of completion, washing over me. We lay like that for a long time, tangled in a heap of limbs and damp sheets, the silence in the room now filled with a profound sense of peace, of exhaustion, of a shared sacred intimacy. The first faint hints of dawn were beginning to seep through the heavy velvet curtains, painting the room in shades of gray and lavender. The storm had passed, both outside and within, and in its wake something new, something fragile, something terrifyingly, beautifully real had been born. As the gray light of dawn began to fill the room, casting long, uncertain shadows, a new kind of awareness settled between us. The raw, uninhibited passion of the night had given way to a quieter, more contemplative intimacy, an intimacy tinged with the dawning realization of what we had done, of the irrevocable nature of our shared transgression. Maya lay beside me, her breathing slow and even, her eyes closed, her face soft and unguarded in repose. The formidable mistress of the house, the enigmatic epicure, had vanished, replaced by this vulnerable, beautiful woman, a woman whose body I now knew with an intimacy that was both thrilling and terrifying. I watched her, my heart aching with a strange, unfamiliar tenderness, a tenderness that was mingled with a growing sense of unease. Last night, in the heat of the moment, nothing had mattered but the fierce, undeniable connection between us. But now, in the cold light of day, the realities of our situation, the potential consequences of our actions began to assert themselves with an unwelcome, undeniable clarity. She was my employer. I was her chef. We lived under the same roof in a secluded estate where secrets, I was beginning to realize, were a form of currency. And we had just engaged in an act that could shatter the delicate, precarious balance of our lives, an act that could have devastating repercussions for both of us. A wave of guilt, sharp and sudden, washed over me. Not for the act itself, not for the pleasure we had shared, but for the potential for pain, for complication, for the inevitable unraveling of the carefully constructed facades we both maintained. She stirred, her eyelids fluttering open, her amber eyes, still soft and luminous from sleep, finding mine. A faint, almost shy smile touched her lip. "Morning," she whispered, her voice a low, husky caress. "Morning," I replied, my own voice equally soft, equally uncertain. The silence descended again, no longer comfortable, but filled with unspoken questions, with unvoiced fears. I could see the dawning awareness in her eyes, the subtle shift from languid contentment to a more guarded, more apprehensive watchfulness. "Lena," she began, her voice hesitant, "last night was incredible. I finished for me." The words, a fierce, defiant affirmation, a desperate attempt to hold on to the magic, the beauty of what we had shared. She nodded slowly, her gaze dropping to the tangled sheets that covered us. "Yes," she agreed, her voice barely audible. "It was, but it was also impossible?" I supplied, a cold knot of dread forming in my stomach. She looked at me then, her eyes filled with a sadness that mirrored my own. "Complicated," she corrected gently. "Exceedingly complicated. Complicated." It was an inadequate word for the maelstrom of emotions, the tangled web of desire and duty, of pleasure and peril that now bound us together. "What does this mean?" I asked the question that had been haunting me since the first light of dawn. "For us? For this?" I gestured vaguely between us, encompassing the shared intimacy, the shattered boundary, the uncertain future. She sighed a long, weary sound and ran a hand through her raven hair, a gesture of frustration, of confusion. "I wish I had an answer for you, Lena," she said, her voice filled with a profound weariness. "But I don't. This is uncharted territory for both of us." She paused, her gaze searching mine. "I am your employer, Lena, and you live here under my roof. There are expectations, responsibilities." "I know," I said, my voice small, tight. The reality of our situation, the inherent power imbalance, the societal and unacceptability of what we had done was a harsh, unwelcome intrusion. "But does that mean last night was a mistake?" I asked, the question a desperate plea for reassurance, for a denial of the cold, hard truth that was beginning to dawn. Her eyes softened, and she reached out, her fingers gently tracing the line of my jaw, her touch sending a fresh wave of warmth, of a tender, almost painful affection through me. "No," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "No, Lena, last night was not a mistake. It was a revelation, but it was also a transgression. And transgressions, as you well know, chef, always have consequences. Consequences. The word hung in the air between us, heavy and ominous. The secluded estate, which had once felt like a sanctuary, a refuge from the outside world, now felt like a gilded cage, its beautiful, ancient walls closing in around us. "We need to be careful," she said finally, her voice quiet but firm, her gaze meeting mine with a new, unsettling intensity. "Discreet. No one can ever know about this, especially not Mrs. Perrin. She sees everything." Mrs. Perrin, the gaunt, silent housekeeper with her watchful eyes and her unreadable expression. The thought of her discovering our secret sent a chill of apprehension down my spine. "Our secret," I echoed, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "A secret that was both beautiful and terrible. A secret that would bind us together, for better or for worse, in a dance of desire and deception." As I lay there beside her in the cool, gray light of that uncertain dawn, the intoxicating haze of passion slowly dissipating, replaced by a dawning, chilling awareness of the complexities, the dangers, the potential for heartbreak that lay ahead. I knew that my life, my carefully ordered, predictable life, had been irrevocably, beautifully, terrifyingly changed. The midnight snack had been consumed, and the taste of it I suspected would linger on my palate, a bittersweet reminder of a forbidden feast for a very, very long time to come.